Welcome everyone. I am Shivai and I'm super excited to present at my third straight PyData Global Conference. If you are interested to also look at some of my previous sessions around Robin, some of the open source projects, they'll be available on the YouTube for PyData Global. So today's talk is about how you can enhance your JupyterLab developer experience with local large language model support and code snippets. So quick introduction about myself. I'm a TensorFlow.js second working group lead, and I'm a developer advocate at Pieces for Developers as well. And today, of course, we'll be understanding that what are some of the major pain points that data scientists or even developers who are using JupyterLab face on a day-to-day basis, and how they can leverage the use of local large language models for enhanced privacy and code snippets that allows overall seamless developer experience, especially when you're working in large developer teams. And we'll identify those issues and then how you can leverage some tooling that is available to everyone uh, in order to enhance your experience when basically developing as a data scientist, and specifically when it comes to JupyterLab. So first, right off the bat, like let's understand the pain points for data scientists when using notebooks. So of course, organizations have worked to build teams of data specialists to tackle tough problems, right? And of course, as software engineers, we are traditionally using IDEs, which are integrated development environments. And generally, when it comes to like computational notebooks, such as Jupyter, Google Colab, AWS SageMaker, Databricks, these are the primary tools for data scientists. And if you understand, like IDs basically reflect a software programming legacy, whereas like data science actually reflects a very different exercise from traditional software engineering, because data scientists, they must wrangle data, produce analysis, share results, and then productionize all of them by themselves. And this workflow is not only like having many steps, but it requires interacting with multiple stakeholders. When you are trying to get data, you are probably interacting with a lot of like data specialists who are giving you that data. And of course, once you want the model to go into production, you're basically collaborating with your MLOps or your data science or your DevOps teams, which will productionize that particular model. So there are certain limitations when it comes to using notebooks, right? So of course, like cleaning and loading the data can be like a very painful process, a very time consuming process, because you might have to download your data from cloud to load to local sources, have to continuously re-upload them, try to use multiple libraries to clean your data as much as possible, but you're never too sure, because like let's say even if there are some deficiency in your data, then you will probably might have to re rewrite all of that particular logic again to clean that data. And then of course, when it comes when it comes to like large data sets, they can cause inconsistencies also in notebooks. Then the most important, I think, like one of the biggest drawbacks of using something like notebooks or even like the PyData, there's no easy way to collaborate. So let's say if you're writing an end-to-end machine learning pipeline or data science pipeline, you want to quickly share your code with some other developer. You might have to take that particular code, you'll copy it, probably paste it in a Google Doc or in a Slack message. And the other developers with whom you're collaborating, they might not have any context to that particular piece of code. Let's say you're trying to visualize some kind of data science diagram, and there's no correlation or context being given to that. And then of course, when you're trying to like reproduce results and reusing code, they are not very easy task, right? So those are some of the common main pain points that we typically see, because of course, even when it comes to like reproducing results, like let's say if someone else were to reproduce notebook results, they'll have to ensure that all of their environment settings are the same. And moreover, you might have to understand that like data scientists basically have to rerun the same analysis on new data or follow the same workflow across multiple projects. And this basically ends up like taking a lot of like time, because reusability is not given to you by default when using something like a JupyterLab notebook or any other notebook for that matter. And this problem basically goes beyond just notebooks. So let's say that there's a scenario where a data scientist has reported that that the model performance is not great. So they will have to probably share that particular piece of code with some ML engineers. Now the ML engineers might not instantly have context about that particular code that is being written. So especially like the biggest issue when it comes to like collaborating with multiple folks is that when you do not have context when sharing these code snippets, and generally like the code snippets that you will be sharing will be through either screenshots or it will be through Slack messages, right? And again, it's a very messy process to share all these code snippets, especially for data scientists, right? There's very limited collaboration when you're using normal ways of collaborating with other data scientists working on the same project. So like one example would be that you are sharing your Google collab notebook. Now Google collab notebooks probably can be shared across teams, but again, you'll not be sharing context. Like let's say if there is a new data scientist member who joins the team, immediately like they'll not have like you're giving them a very large notebook to work with. They'll not have context about that particular notebook, and it might take them time to understand each and every particular part of that particular Jupyter notebook that has that particular machine learning code, right? So this leads to like communication gap, and you cannot really very easily test those particular code snippets easily inside of your notebooks or across teams. So especially when it comes to like onboarding of new developers, new data scientists into your project, or even like sharing of issues that you're facing, right? Whether it's with respect to data analysis, all of that, that can be a very time consuming piece. So those are some of the common pain points that we often see when we are dealing with code snippets, or we are dealing with collaboration across different data science teams. And of course, the key challenges, right, is that we saw that copy pasting of your code, then of course ensuring that there's a test coverage that you are also having inside of an entire project. Of course, resolving bugs with a large unfamiliar code base, especially for new team members, right? That can also be an issue. Maintaining code quality might also be an issue. If there are new developers, they might write their own way of writing code logic. So ensuring that code quality remains consistent across your entire team, especially even when you're like writing code. Because see, one thing to keep in mind is that people might think of data scientists and they might take them for granted. A lot of data scientists still have to follow good software development practices, like writing good quality code. A lot of like machine learning code also now comes with a lot of like test cases. So basically over time, a lot of like software engineering practices are now also being followed when writing machine learning code or data science code, right? Even if you're working with notebooks, you have to follow good coding practices, ensure that when your model goes into production, it can follow all the different edge cases. So all these like challenges are like go beyond just data scientists, and of course are also followed across machine learning and standard software development, right? So of course like these are some of the challenges that we continuously face. So in order to basically address like how can we make sharing of all these code snippets, or even sharing the context of your entire project itself amongst team members, so that it's easier to onboard new members. Whenever you're sharing some code snippet, there's some additional context that you can actually give to that particular code snippet. For example, if you're sharing a confusion matrix related code block from your project, the other developers might already have context to what that particular confusion matrix is based on. So what was that initial input data on the basis of which that particular confusion matrix was generated? If you can give that additional logic or background and context, that can save up a lot of time for other members to then collaborate and help you out, right? So it overall helps us to improve the communication, especially amongst members who are working across different teams or cross-functional teams as well, because data scientists are going to be working in a lot of times in cross-functional aspects. So these are some of the main reasons why current ways of implementing JupyterLab, or even for data scientists, is not the most straightforward or the easiest. But of course, by sharing code snippets with context, that can basically solve a lot of these particular problems, right? And that is where I like to quickly introduce a tool which is like Pieces, which allows you to basically have a centralized storage for all of your different code snippets. It can not only like generate code snippets, but it can also like give you context about those particular code snippets as well. And within, if you kind of understand that a lot of the pain points that we kind of understood with respect to sharing of code snippets basically is taken care when we are basically sharing, because you can efficiently share code snippets. Take any piece of code that you have, probably that confusion matrix particular code block, generate an intelligent generated code snippet from it, and then just share it across, because you could not just have just one particular code block, but you could also generate a code snippet for your entire project itself and then share it across different teams. It will have context to what that particular code snippet is. It will intelligently define that for you, right? And you can just share that across by sharing like a shareable link, which can be then shared across to others. And that particular shareable link will not only carry what is there in that particular code block, but also have context associated with it, right? And then of course, you can basically integrate that with another piece of code, which is the Pieces Copilot, which basically essentially means that similar to a Chat GPT, because of course a lot of us, might be implementing Chat GPT to ask a question to, for example, like let's say you're stuck on a bug, and then you end up asking Chat GPT like, hey, how could I resolve this particular issue? You might get a response, and then you might end up using that particular response. But of course, one of the security concerns while using that kind of Chat GPT is that not every particular team might be interested in sending their data, privacy focused data, to Chat GPT, because and that's a security concern for a lot of like data science teams. So Pieces Copilot also can use local large language models, which are open source as well. For example, Code Llama or Llama 2, and you can basically then run your entire end-to-end Chat GPT like experience, but get explainability of your code. Try to ask that particular Copilot that, hey, rephrase that particular code, rephrase that particular code. It will do that for you. Solve a particular bug, it will go ahead and do that for you. So all by using local large language models, so that you use open source models and at the same time you use them locally in your system, so that you are not having any concern having to send your data to a remote server or to Chat GPT for that matter, right? So that is what can be handled with the help of Pieces Copilot, and we'll see this demonstration right now how this can basically work. And the great thing is that Pieces basically comes with a number of different extensions. So Pieces comes with its standalone local desktop application, but there are a number of different extensions that are also supported, and one of them is for JupyterLab as well. And yes, so we'll now go through a concrete example where we'll understand that how you can basically leverage this for your own demonstration. So I'll quickly show all of your demonstrations. So for example, let's say that I want to use a particular for this let me share my screen over here. Let's say I want to quickly take a look at a notebook for iris dataset. Let's say I want to try to work on an iris data visualization K-mean classification dataset. So I'll go to Kaggle, as anyone might, and let's say I'll just go ahead and download this particular notebook that I have. So let's quickly go ahead and download this particular notebook. And now I'll open up my JupyterLab, and I'll go ahead and click on new, and I'll basically go ahead and open up a new notebook over here. So let's go ahead and click on new, and I'll open up a new notebook. For example, in this case, let's try to use that particular iris one that I just downloaded. So it's this one, right? So it's this particular iris. I'll just discard this particular over here. So I have this particular now this particular notebook that is being powered, right? So I'm using my standard the PyData interface. Just give me one second. So, for example, let's say I want to use this particular notebook. So let's say I want to use this particular notebook. So I have this particular notebook that is being powered, right? So I'm using my standard the PyData interface. Just give me one second. So, for example, let's say I want to use this particular notebook that is being powered, right? So I'm using my standard the PyData interface. Sorry for that. So now let's take a look at this particular interface. So now let's go ahead and I will. So this is my notebook, and I'll just start to run it. Right. Let's just execute all the different steps that I have. In this case, I'll just download the IRS dataset and also run this. So this is a sample data, set that I'm using. Iris data, as any data scientist like would probably start off with. Now, for example, immediately what I see over here is that I see that I get this error that no module named sklearn.cross validation. So now this is where I will introduce the pieces extension. So you can find that inside of the extensions. So you can take a look at the Jupyter Lab pieces extension, which is this particular extension that we'll be using. So in this case, when I again share my tab, you can see that the extension is towards the right hand side. And over here, I basically have this interface where I can interact with a Copilot. And over here, by default, you can see that the model with which I'm running it is GPT 3.5, which is basically a cloud-based model. So you can select between whether you want an on-device model that is running locally. So in this case, for on-device models, I have option of both Llama 2 and of Code Llama. So for instance, like let's say I want to change the context. I don't want to send my data to a chat GPT or to an OpenAI server. I can use the local large language model, which is Llama 2. So I select that. And now my active model that I'm going to be using, the large language model, is Llama 2. So all interactions now that will happen with my Copilot. So this is like my personal chat GPT, but all is being powered locally in my system. Now, what I can do is I can simply just go ahead over here and say that I want to set the context for this entire notebook inside of my Copilot. So I can set the context over here. I'll click on context. I will select which particular file I want the context to be set for. So in this case, I'll go ahead and add the context for this new notebook that I've just added. And basically what would happen is that this my large language model will have the context to my entire notebook now. I can also set context for just one function or for one code block. In this case, now I can simply go ahead and ask it that, hey, I'm facing this particular issue, and I'll right click and I'll ask Pieces Copilot over here, and I'll say that I am getting uh, this issue about no module named sklearn dot cross validation, right? And then it will basically start to give me a response. So it will say it will probably take like a few seconds. So based on this, it says that based on this particular train test split, we don't have the particular module is no longer available now. Like let's say if I set the context as probably OpenAI with GPT-4, I can also ask the same question to it. Probably I'm getting this issue over here, so I can ask it again and like just ask it like how should I solve this particular issue, because I'm getting this particular module name. So perhaps like you can see that I'm getting this error. So it will direct me to say that, okay, like if you're using cross validation, that's probably an old one, because now for instead of like cross validation, we'll probably end up using model selection. So if I use model selection over here, you can probably then end up resolving this particular issue. So if I run this now, then it will run. So the idea really is that what you can essentially do is that you have your own personal chat GPT in front of you and directly inside of your Jupyter Lab. So you don't have to navigate somewhere else to like Stack Overflow or to Google to try to find some error that you're facing inside of your code block. For example, like let's say over here, if I execute all the rest of the programs, and for instance, like let's say I'm making a prediction and I'm basically generating like a confusion matrix. So over here in this case, like in this particular confusion matrix, I'm just returning. But let's say I want to visualize this particular matrix, so I can ask another question to it. Can you help um, visualize uh, this particular this particular matrix, this confusion matrix, let's say. with probably with a diagram. So perhaps it will give us like some kind of suggestion on probably like cbon. So it says like you can use cbon, and over here it will basically give you some code demonstration that okay, like if you want to visualize your your particular confusion matrix. And again, like we can probably just go ahead and copy this and see if it actually works, and see over here. So for example, like let's say I'll go ahead and copy this particular code over here. So I can use pieces to copy this over here, and then let's paste this particular confusion matrix and see if it actually like will work. So I'll just basically print I'll just basically comment the above code and just try to run if it works. So now it does generate our confusion matrix. So as a data scientist, I did not have to spend time like writing that particular code on my own, but all of like I just gave it a prompt and it basically did that for me. But this is of course like working locally, just personally. Now what I can do is I can also go ahead and save this particular code snippet to pieces and also share it with anyone. So instead of like normally what would have done is I would have copied this particular code. If I'm facing some issue in it, I will perhaps now copy this, share it in a Slack message that hey, John, I'm facing this issue, I'm facing an error in this, or I would have taken a screenshot of this particular issue and shared it. But now I can just take this particular code, use that particular generated code over here. For example, this is my shared code that has and what you can see is that it basically gives all this particular additional information about that particular code. It gives me that it's a Python program. It gives me a description that this particular code creates a plot of confusion matrix using cbon and matplotlib, and it displays the result as predictor or truth. So it gives you not only the information about who shared it, a brief description about this particular code snippet, but also it gives you some related links that hey, because this particular code is related to something like a matplotlib, so you might want to give it some additional more context. So for example, it gives you some related links about matplotlib, about cbon. So again, giving more context to data scientists for sharing these code snippets amongst each other, right? So these are some real world like examples on how you can like really leverage. And again, being privacy focused, if you don't want to use perhaps chat gpt, you could basically convert this model into one of the local large language models and be completely free, because of course llama 2 is an open source model, and you can leverage that. So even if you don't have internet connection, you can leverage and get that same similar chat gpt like experience right inside of your JupyterLab, right? And of course, you can have context of all the previous conversations that you have, similar to ChatGPT. So all the different conversations. For example, yesterday I was just like going through asking ChatGPT like as a way to kind of prepare my presentation, like what are some of the daily challenges that data scientists face. So some of the content that is generated for my slides were also inspired by some of the results I got. And again, they were implemented by using the local large language model because I didn't have access to my internet. I was in a flight. And of course, like, you can basically go to any of your previous code. And the great thing is that this particular context will be shared amongst the different integrations that are there. So if like, let's say your, your DevOps team is using VS Code. So you could basically open up an instance of VS Code, have that same experience and context being set across different platforms. Now, there's another really interesting piece to this. For example, like let's say I'm going through Kaggle, I'm going through a particular, I'm just looking at this particular data set. And for example, I come across a particular piece of code. Perhaps, like let's say I'm going to matplotlib documentation. So I go to matplotlib. I'm going through, the documentation over here. Now let's say I'm going through the documentation. I'll quickly go to like let's say some tutorials. Probably take an example of a code snippet for like let's say intermediate like styling with cycler, and I want to understand that hey, like what is this particular code? I want to understand that. So I could basically just ask Copilot right inside of my window as well. So I can just open up a side window and basically I think like I'm not sure if it's sharing, but let me stop sharing and share my entire screen. So over here, I could basically give it some additional context and ask it, like, for example, in this case, pieces Copilot is giving me this additional context about, hey, like, I can ask it any particular website, and it will basically give me context to what that particular code logic is, right? So in this case, like, what is basically happening is I'm giving it some additional context about from a particular website itself, and it is able to get context. And now I can save this particular code logic that I basically have, and it will have context to this particular code. So, and what I can do is I can simply go ahead and copy this particular code as well. I can save it to pieces as well. Like, I can, if I want, I can save it as well in any particular page. So I can save this particular snippet, I can share it anywhere that I want. So of course, all this then can also, like, for example, if I save it now, I want to use it, right? I want to save it. I can save it, and then I can basically go ahead and basically try to get that same particular code snippet that I used over here inside of my like, for example, over here you can see that I had basically saved this from a personal email, but now I have context to that same particular code inside of my JupyterLab as well. So the great thing is that, for example, if you're researching about some particular code as a data scientist, like if you're doing some kind of research, you can try to like use that research and store it in a centralized place and access that entire research inside of your JupyterLab. Again, share it across different teams. So that is one of the major benefit when it basically comes. And again, I'll quickly share my screen to my particular demonstration over here. So of course, like, just understanding like what we have understood so far is that like when opening the code and then of course like copy pasting it, that takes up a lot of time, right? And like, let's say if you're having to, and that also what ends up happening is that basically you might reuse certain pieces of code again and again. So copy pasting that same code again and again can be very time consuming. But of course, like, with this implementation, having a centralized storage for all of your code snippets makes it very easy to just reuse code as well. And then of course, with Copilot, right, especially for security concerned or security related concerns when it comes to like using LLMs, that's also one area where by using local LLMs you get privacy focused as well. So you can just open up a Jupyter notebook, ask Copilot to basically ask all of your doubts. And of course, like, having to go to different websites, like 5-6 different websites, and trying to find that particular same related issue might be a very time consuming. But since the Copilot has access to your entire code base, it makes it very easy for you to then just understand that context and get direct results from the Copilot while sitting inside of your JupyterLab instance itself, right? So inclusion, like, basically let's ditch screenshots and copy pasting and basically share context of code snippets with context to have better clarity amongst different team members as well. So of course, now I'll be open to any questions. So I think, let me see if there are any questions.
I think there's one question, in the Q&A. Just want to be mindful of time. We are at the top of the hour, so if we could do that, and then we can kind of take this discussion to Discord as well. But let's get that one question quickly answered.
Yeah, and by the way, like, for those folks, like, it is pieces.app. Like, I think like that is the link. And then question is, how hard is it to install and set up pieces for a team? So basically, if you're working inside of a team, there is this specific thing called as basically the related peoples. So as a team, you can, as an enterprise, you can basically set the context. And Nishan is asking, can you set context across a whole Git repository? So that is completely possible, because you can log into your pieces account with GitHub as well, and then GitHub will give access to pieces to all of your different code repositories if you want, and it can set context across an entire Git repository as well. You can set context not just for a single file, for a single function, for a file, for an entire code snippet, for an entire folder as well. So yes, that can be done. And of course, like, if you have any further questions, you can connect with me on Twitter. But yeah, if there are any other further questions, feel free to connect with me, and I'll be more than happy to answer any of those particular questions.